and welcome to another edition of Chapter Select, the book club for video games. I'm your host this week, Randy. With me, as always, is Jens.
Randy!
Jens, hopefully for you, it is not as hot as it is in the Northwest.
It's about 84 degrees.
I hate you. I hate you so much.
Worse where you are?
It is 7:22 at night, and it is still 95 degrees right now.
Okay, you're 10 degrees above me.
And this weekend, it is supposed to hit like 115.
Oh, that's bad.
And it's supposed to do that for like 3 straight days. So...
And it was quite humid, but it was actually... I took a nice walk to Grub Burger. I had a few cocktails and a burger. Walked home. It wasn't too terrible outside.
Yeah, my weather app said Sunday 115 degrees and 0% humidity. It's just gonna suck so much. But that's okay. We're here to talk video games. We're here to talk about Gone Home, which I'm excited to talk about. However, we are into June, which, at least for me, was the big month so far in the year as far as video game releases. I will be having 2 reviews hit W2M at some point when Sean gets to them. I was a little late on one, and I missed his time where he had time to edit. So we'll have Ratchet & Clank and Final Fantasy VII Remake Intermission, because names aren't long enough with Japanese RPGs. Both of those reviews will be up at some point. But Jens, what have you been playing?
I've played both of those games, though unlike you, I have not finished either one of them. I'm about 2 hours into Intergrade, and I'm about... I don't know how many hours, but I'm like 42% completion on Ratchet.
Nice. How are you liking them?
Well, Ratchet is freaking spectacular.
Yes.
It is one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen in my life. It is in the top 3, definitely, with Demon's Souls and Resident Evil Village as far as best-looking next-gen games are concerned. I could see an argument to be made that it's the best-looking of those 3 as well. I mean, it really is the Pixar. You know, that's the stupid cliche of the Pixar film come to life. You know, we're finally
right.
This is every generation we say we're finally there, but I feel like we're actually kind of finally there. Those close-ups, insane. Like the facial hair, the rigging on the mouths, like everything about it, and just you can look at something like Demon's Souls and you say, that looks next gen. It's really clean, beautiful. It's making great use of the HDR and of the lighting and all that stuff. And it runs perfectly. Or even, something like Resident Evil Village, but they don't have just the sheer amount of stuff.
Yes, that was going to be my argument.
The amount of particles and crazy lighting effects and gimmicky things. You have a gun that will turn a 3-dimensional enemy into a piece of pixel art,
yes,
a unique piece of pixel art based on your perspective, which then will turn into a 2-dimensional, version of it that you can still rotate around in 3 dimensions, and it breaks apart into little individual, perfect little blocks, each of their own color. And you think they didn't need to go that far for this one gimmick weapon. But this game is just full of this kind of stuff. Like, there's so much flex, the portal stuff. Got the foliage effects with that foliage weapon that you can use to slow things down.
The old sprinkler, yeah.
The sprinkler, like all that tech is just so neat.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that was the thing that blew me away, and that's what you said, was just how much is happening on the screen. You could have 15 enemies on the screen, all shooting at you. Half of them could have been turned pixelized and turning into blocks. All these bullets are flying everywhere. You're dropping the Mr. Zurdon or whatever helper enemies as well, and not once did I ever experience any kind of frame rate drop. I'm playing on the performance. I played on the performance RT mode, which is the way to play it.
I don't care about the high frame rate. I want the visual. I just playing on fidelity.
No, this gives you frames. Both. I mean, it gives you the ray tracing and all of that stuff with the crazy frames. And I'm never one to go like. I've watched so many people play other games. And they're like, oh, just dropped like 10 frames. It's only going like 50. It's like, I have no idea. Like, if it drops way down and starts skipping, I'll notice. And I can sometimes notice when it is going back and forth between some. But, like, if you're telling me this one's 30 and this one's 60, most of the time I can't tell. But there's just so much going on. It's a very beautiful game. It's a very colorful game. I gave it a 9 out of 10 on the website, just because they don't have 0.5s, and
Right.
it was so close to a 10. It was just, once I sat down to review, there was enough nitpicky things that I came up with when I was writing my review that I'm like, I can't quite give this a 10.
There are a couple. Most of my nitpicks are around the traversal in the game.
Yeah,
I haven't read your reviews, so I don't know what
to
specifically.
me, as far as nitpicky stuff, like the worlds don't seem that big. So I
I
like
think
I would
Ratchet
like
and Clank levels. They're pretty
Yeah.
standard for what I expect.
they're very
from-
standard stuff, and playing the 2006 version, other than like upping everything to PS5, I don't think this brings anything new to the table, which is not a complete knock, but it was just something that stopped me from giving it a 10. But it's a fantastic game, and if you have a PS5, you must play it. And also, like I said, I reviewed Intermission, which is the Yuffie DLC, and one of the things I said on there is if you have played Final Fantasy VII Remake, or you plan on playing Final Fantasy VII Remake before whatever they call Part 2, playing the Yuffie Intermission DLC is an absolute must. It's not just to play more Final Fantasy. There is some lore that gets dropped in the last section of the game that has sent all of these guys that I watched after the first game doing all the lore busting and what do they mean by this, and oh, his hand went in this direction, so it must mean this, or this is this color and this, but in the original game it was this color, so what
I feel
does
like we
it
had this
mean?
Conversation with Final Fantasy VII Remake and how
Yes.
much I don't care about these analysis videos.
It's fun. I mean, this game, I beat it about 6 hours, so now we have another year or 2 or 3 until the next part, so I have no problem deep diving into ridiculousness. It's what I loved about the TV show Game of Thrones, where it was, okay, now where are we going to go?
Yeah,
Or
but
I love watching The Talking Dead after The Walking Dead, because I like those conversations, and that's what the ending.
I'm not looking for a puzzle box from Final Fantasy, but I will say this. Yuffie, just as a character, again, I'm still pretty early, but I just absolutely, even though we're still in environments that are very much just Final Fantasy VII Remake environments, I haven't gotten to. I know there's a new area, or an area from the old game, beautifully recreated,
Yes.
that you go to. But just being in the pizza for now, and doing kind of minor quests. I really enjoy the variation to the combat system. I like all her skills. But mostly I just love the character. I think the character is just so
Which
lovable.
honestly is a complete victory, because Yuffie, I don't think I even liked the original
I did not
game.
remember. You know this. I did not remember her from the old game. And the old game was so long ago for me. That's another reason I don't care about the puzzle box stuff, because to me, Final Fantasy VII is kind of a distant memory.
Right.
And I'm kind of treating this like they're just new Final Fantasy games, and I'm enjoying them, and they've got that nostalgic flair, but I'm not looking too deep into how they adapted every little aspect of it.
By the way, for anybody out there that is curious of playing the older Final Fantasy, I recommend the newest versions that they've came out with, because I went back and played it on the PS4 just before Remake came out, just to remind myself. The way that these Final Fantasy games, they did it with 8 as well. The upgrades that they've done on them, I mean, you can cheese them if you want, where you can hit a button combination and you just get full health. And if you just want to just skip right through the game and just experience the story, they allow that. But the thing that I used almost constantly, especially at any point of grinding, is you can click on, I think it was like the left stick, and it's a 3x speed, which just those old PlayStation games have some slow grinding in them, where you have to kind of move around a map and fight just dozens of enemies to get up to a level enough to then be able to beat this boss. It is like nothing anymore with the 3-time system. So they're really, really fun to play if you ever want to go back and play the original. But yeah, I absolutely adore Intermission. Again, it's 6 hours, but that's DLC for you. I think it's well worth the $20 that you have to add on top of it. The load times on this Final Fantasy stuff now that's on PS5 is
way better.
Insane. I am only at the very beginning of Intrograde, which is the PS5 version of Remake, and I hit X, and I still do my normal thing of I'll hit X and then I'll look down at my phone because we're going to have a little bit of a load time. I couldn't even touch my phone and the game had started. Like, it's so impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely makes me want to replay Remake as well, except, of course, I'm drowning in games and it'll be hard to fit in, but I really want to. The upgrade seems really neat.
And then the last game I've played before we get to yours, because I'm very, very curious what you're going to say about the last game that you want to talk about.
Uh-huh.
But now that I've gotten through these two, I'm kind of starting to go back to my backlog, and I'm not quite ready to deep dive back into Yakuza Like a Dragon. That's coming very soon because I want to finish that game. But I have Mario Golf coming out tomorrow, and I'm doing the review for that. So I'm like, I just need something to waste some time. I dove right back into Manhunt. Did you ever play Manhunt or Man-Eater? Sorry, Man-Eater.
Oh yeah, I have played Man-Eater. Uh-huh.
Manhunt is the old Rockstar game, and that's where I got mixed up. But Man-Eater, I had played, it was on PS Plus last year or something. I played a little bit of it, and it was no big deal. We got the PS5 upgrade, and I haven't really touched it. I played that thing for like 3 hours today, just mindlessly eating fish or humans. That's a fun little game, and it doesn't take itself seriously. I love the commentator in it. So I'm very happy I was able to pick that back up, and I plan on finishing it either tonight or tomorrow in between some golfing.
And it's been both on PS Plus and Game Pass, so pretty much anyone can play it.
Absolutely. It's well worth the time. It's just a fun arcadey game. However, I agree. We got to talk about...
It's the return of the kind of fun B-tier high-concept games that we used to love in the 360 generation.
100%. But I want to get to your game, because this was going to be our next game.
Yes. And then again, the reviews, harking back to the 360 generation.
Right. And then the reviews came out, and we got worried. And then you tried it, and you got really worried. And then I gave it a try, and you played it a little bit more. And it's no longer the game that we're playing next.
And your impression was it's fine. Didn't you come back and say it's basically fine?
I did the tutorial, and it was slow. But
which character did you play?
The warrior, I think.
Drizzt or the guy with the big hammer, or the
big hammer?
The dark elf.
The big
hammer guy. Okay, yeah. My first attempt was with the dwarf, and that is what felt... I mean, I don't know how the other melee characters control, because the dwarf to me felt so slow. It was like controlling an MMO where you're queuing up attacks, where it just felt like, okay, I'm just going to hammer out. I'm going to hit LB and RT and hammer out a melee combo here, and then I'm going to spend the next 5 to 10 seconds watching the character execute that melee combo.
Right. True.
Like, it didn't feel like you're directly controlling it. There's just a lag on everything. So I told Randy, like, hey, I'm having a bad feeling about this game. Like, it was going to be our first co-op experience together for the podcast. And just not only is the story nothing so far, like there would not be anything to discuss for us, but also, my God, like, it is such a chore to play. The loot system's terrible. It's kind of like Anthem or Destiny in that you have to like wait till the very end of the mission to actually find out whether your loot is even any good that you found along the way. It's that kind of thing where it's giving you like tokens or placeholder loot until you finish a dungeon. It has done all sorts of irritating things to me. It gives you kind of like, what was the Shovel Knight? Shovel Knight has the thing where you get either a Dark Souls style bonfire or you get a reward instead, and you just basically skip a checkpoint. And for that run, you can no longer use the checkpoint. It basically becomes used up. So they do this here where, you hit these points where it says, do you want a checkpoint or do you want to increase your loot quality? And of course, you're going to say, I'm going to increase my loot quality. But the one time that I actually did the checkpoint, just because I'd come so far along, the first level's really long. I'd come like close to the very end, and I said, okay, I've got a checkpoint now because it's just too dangerous otherwise. And then immediately after I checkpointed, the game crashed. So I booted the game back up. I was like, everything's gonna be fine. I literally, I specifically used the super valuable makes your multiplier go away checkpoint so that I could boot back into this mission just in time. What a stroke of luck. But no, it throws you back into the hub, and all my level progress was gone. So that was fun. But I ended up switching to the archer. She's like an elf archer type character. And playing with the archer, the game is completely broken. Like, it already just feels like a really shitty... Like, it's not... I'm not saying it's Ride to Hell Retribution level shitty as far as the melee, but it is, like, very awkward, clunky melee combat. But then when you play as a ranged character, the AI just breaks. Enemies will just stand around doing nothing while you keep sniping. And not just from a great distance, like medium distance, or even if you alert them and they start chasing you around a little bit, if you just back up enough, they'll resume just standing around doing nothing, and you can keep poking at their heads. And you just stand there. Every encounter is just you standing there for 5 minutes, doing, pumping arrows into all the enemies and then going to the next area while they stand around doing nothing. That's how I cleared the first campaign on my own. And it was tedious, but even the big bosses, like the bosses are so slow, you can just kite them around and keep poking them with arrows the entire time.
Yeah, you tweeted out the video if you finish off the one boss, and that was like, oh my God.
Yeah. So, it's interesting how ranged characters just completely, like, the AI just is not equipped to deal with ranged characters, and they give you an archer. So, game just broke basically completely. Maybe this is the best time to play it, actually. If you're an archer,
right?
You can cheese your way through it. At least for your first run.
If you want to sit through some boring-ass gameplay for a while, I guess.
Incredibly boring. That's the thing. It's one of the most boring games I have played in recent memory. In a long time, honestly.
Like I said, I only did the tutorial just to kind of see how the controls felt, and they were, like I said, they were fine. It was whatever. But the one thing that drove me absolutely nuts, and any game that wants to be like this ever, understand this: do not put attacks on trigger.
Oh, it's just trying to be Souls. But the thing with Souls is you don't spam attacks that much in Souls.
Like, Souls is different because you're trying to time and get the right timing. Like, you are spamming R1 to do your light attacks and then setting up your R2. And I don't want to do that for this brawler kind of
Well, thankfully you can reconfigure your buttons.
I never got that far to care, but if we would have played this game, I definitely would have. But it's just
I should say you cannot reconfigure your buttons in game. It's just the Xbox has the native ability to have custom button setups.
That makes sense.
The game would not be that friendly. It's just the built-in console feature. So if you're on PlayStation, you might be boned in that regard, because I don't think PlayStation lets you just make custom button layouts with different profiles. Which, one of the best freaking things about Xbox, man. Like, I love that Elite controller, and I love having, like, 3 different, just kind of shortcut button layouts that you can just toggle between. It's amazing.
Yep. The one thing Microsoft, well, not the one thing, but the biggest thing that Microsoft has going for them is just they're so gamer-friendly with all of their decisions, whether it's the Elite controllers for those that want that, or changing the map. The HUD is still not my favorite, but PlayStation 5's HUD is not great either right now. But then, of course, Game Pass is just ridiculously such a wonderful thing.
I've carried forward so many original Xbox and 360 games, too, that it's just become kind of my library machine, where if I'm going to buy anything multi-platform, I'll buy digitally on Xbox because it just goes into the giant vault.
Right.
Which I like. But again, we can stop filleting Xbox now. I'm not at all excited about most of the new offerings, but it's a great little piece of kit.
Yes. All right, let's get into the main topic of this show, and that is Gone Home. Gone Home was made by the Fulbright Company way back in 2013. It came out on Windows at that time. It came to consoles in North America, January of 2016, and the Switch in 2018. Basically, you play as a girl who has been away from home for a while, and now you're coming back. Your family has moved houses since you left, which it kind of adds into the feel of being in a place you've never been, but being surrounded by family stuff, and you see boxes all over the place. And basically, you go around and uncover, I guess the main story is of your sister, Sam. and everything that she's gone through with the move and teenage life. There's some side stories and stuff as well, but that's the main one. But the first thing I'm going to ask you, Jens, is I played this back before it was on consoles, back a long time ago on the computer, and it was a nice refresher course going back and playing it. But what did you think of the gameplay style and how, yes, it is a walking simulator, but it's different than a lot of walking simulators that I've played even to today?
That's an interesting that you say that, because I feel like it is a walking simulator whose DNA I have experienced in many games that have come after it. Whether it's, What Remains of Edith Finch or Tacoma, Rapture is really a spiritual sequel to Dear Esther, which, Dear Esther came out a year before this, and I think is still the prettier game and but that is a pure walking simulator where just walk forward through these environments, and every now and then you'll pick up a note or hear some narration. Whereas Gone Home is very much instead of, traversing an island or some semi-sprawling environment, it is confined to a house. That's where it's kind of similar to, with lots of, the big sprawling old family house with lots of secret passages and secrets to uncover, which again, you look at, What Remains of Edith Finch, it's obviously kind of going for a similar thing. The What Remains of Edith Finch is really cynical and dark, whereas Gone Home has this interesting vibe, and it's a purely exploratory. It's like an investigative game. So you investigate this space, you figure out where all the passages are, you figure out the combinations on lockers and stuff based on learning things about the family from reading stuff, and also listening to, every now and then Katie will narrate, or you will hear narration that's like an entry from your sister's diary that you pick up or something. So there is a little bit of that, but mostly you're just picking up objects, examining them, and figuring stuff out, where keys are and the combinations to things. Those are your main puzzles, and, what order you're gonna uncover. Actually, it seems fairly freeform as far as where you can go first.
Yeah, you could beat the game.
You could beat the game right away, but that, of course, requires knowledge of the secret passage.
Yes. And by the way, if anyone ever says that walking simulators are not hard, try to get that trophy for beating that game in a minute.
I have done about 20 runs at it.
I can't do it.
Gotten it. No.
I spent a good amount of time yesterday after I finished my run through, and
I knew you were going to question me about this, but I'm glad you'd also. It's impossible. I don't know how people have done it. I don't think a minute. It just doesn't feel like it's enough. But
no,
it's fine. I'm never going to get the trophy to get all 23 log entries in 10 minutes either. Again, I hate. We talked about this with Maquette. I hate doing stuff under time pressure. Tacoma, I got all the trophies, and I was happy doing that, but I don't think that with Gone Home, it just seems much more unforgiving in this regard.
I will, and I won't anyways, because there's no platinum, so screw them.
But yeah, the thing that sets it apart from stuff like Edith Finch is just that the primary story you uncover, it's a game that has an ominous feeling, and you fear the worst coming into this environment. The house seems abandoned. It seems kind of ominous. The lights, you've got to start turning on the lights and making things more livable and going through stuff. And you think, oh my God, what am I going to uncover here? But the core story is actually quite heartwarming. And, the side stories, which are about the other members of the family, specifically your father and, your great uncle, Oscar. So there is the great uncle Oscar Mason, who bequeathed the house to your father Terry, and there's a story between them that I don't think I've fully uncovered, or it is vague in the game.
It's very, very vague. It's one of those that it's set there purposely for people to then discuss. And that's why I say why this one still does things that I don't see in a lot of walking simulators is, yes, that main story with Sam is what you get in a lot of walking simulators. Walk around. But, well, hold on. Just you pick up stuff. She narrates her story, but you get two completely other stories that have zero narration, and you could completely skip and never see a single thing with. Like, from what I remember from walking simulators that I've played, whether it be Edith Finch or that Rapture game with the weird balls or whatever, ghost spirit things.
Firewatch?
I still have never finished Firewatch. I've played a bit of it, but all of that stuff, maybe Firewatch would be different because you're only talking to the one lady on the other mic, on the other walkie-talkie, so that might be it. But I can't remember either of the two main walking simulators that I've played fully that only showed you the one story and then everything else was hidden. Like the Rapture and Edith Finch both tell multiple stories, and there may be one that's kind of hidden in note form, but the fact that 2/3 of the story is specifically note form, I thought was really, really cool, and it adds to that ominous feeling that you were talking about. And that's the one feeling I remember most from playing this originally. Is obviously this is one of the first of its kind. Obviously, you say your Esther's first. I haven't played that one, but so this is the first walking
really
simulator that I've ever played. It's completely different than anything else I had experienced at the time. It was getting rave reviews at the time. People were calling it Game of the Year, which I think is a bit too far. But I come from, the survival horror genre stuff of Silent Hill, and you come in with the thunder and lightning. Nobody's home. It looks like nobody's been home for a while. You're seeing all this stuff about your dad failing as an author and not being able to find success, and like his book ideas are getting turned down now. Your sister is talking about issues with high school. It looks like, your mom and dad are going to split up, and then now they're talking about ghosts and stuff. I'm like, all right, who died and I'm going to open something and there's going to be a body. And that's all I can remember from the first time playing. And it never happens, thank God. But
well, the interesting thing is how much it subverts that, right? It sets up these expectations. And I know that I've seen people voice frustrations over the fact that it isn't a ghost story and it isn't horror and it isn't something that's dark. But rather, even the story of your parents, like, yes, Terry was traumatized by something. Like, something happened between Oscar and Terry, where Oscar went too far and Terry was traumatized in some way, and Oscar felt guilty and gave him the house. And then living in the house, which is connected to the trauma, kind of eats away at Terry. And he begins drinking. He becomes an alcoholic. He ruins his career as a writer. He goes from being a published author to being a guy who's being fired for putting too many personal details in his electronics reviews. And you see that he's on the way to destroying his marriage. But then in the end, you see that Terry is really making an effort and he's overcoming his trauma. And he and your mother are actually the reason why the house is deserted is because they're on like a couples retreat to try and fix their marriage. And your sister has run away. She's overcome, the societal limitations and her parents' disapproval and all that, and run away with her lesbian girlfriend. So the reason why nobody's there is, in both cases, really innocuous. And while there is some darkness, it's kind of about people escaping from that and overcoming that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's why, as you said, some people are upset about it. I was thankful that it went in that direction and kind of played with your emotions and played with your fears. And you're like, God, especially then when you start going into the basement and you're like, it just is even creepier. And I want to go back to the gameplay just real quick.
Yes.
Something I just remembered, and I have to ask you, were you as OCD anal as I was, even going back and playing it here the other day, that I had to shut doors behind me? I was turning lights off when I was leaving rooms. No. I don't know what it is about that game. I couldn't help myself. It's
funny that you mentioned that one factoid, and I knew kind of a lot about this game going in, even though I'd never played it. I'll get into that in a minute. But they actually, for people like you, they had to patch in the option to actually put objects back exactly where you picked them up. That didn't used to be in the game. When that game first launched, you were just you couldn't really, it was just a physics engine.
Oh,
and
as far as items go, I toss shit all over the place. But for whatever reason, the lights and the doors were the biggest thing for me. I don't know why.
You're the opposite of me. I was very careful to put everything exactly back where I found it because it's my damn family home. But of course I'm going to leave the lights on and the doors open. You've got to keep track of where you've been. And, you don't want to...
Yeah, there's a map.
You're searching these environments. You don't want to miss anything. So obviously, like, and I'm home now, so of course I'm going to go around turning all the lights on.
Yeah, gotta get that electricity built up. No,
Exactly.
listen, my dad is having hardships and not being an author anymore.
Money.
You gotta conserve the money. The one thing I did do with the items is every time I found a cassette tape, I went back to the very first cassette tape and I just piled them together.
There are multiple cassette players. There's one there's one in the basement, which is good because I was like, oh, thank God I don't have to carry this tape all the way to the beginning. I can use this other cassette player. Well, I really like the environmental. I agree with you. The best stuff in this game is not the lesbian love story. Not that I've got any. The lesbian love story is good. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much what you'd expect. I do kind of like the aspect where the girlfriend has always dreamed of joining the military and gives that up for her, where she's about to enlist and then in the end she doesn't, so they can run away. Mm-hmm. I liked that little twist to it, but mostly it's what you would expect from that kind of story. It's just I don't think most people expected that it would be that kind of story.
Right.
But I did really like finding just Terry's book. Seeing Terry wrote a book about a guy going back in time to stop the JFK assassination, which is why I then ended up putting 1963 in as the combination to pretty much every safe I found, and it paid off, which is great. Felt really good.
Which, by the way, did God Home come out before or after Stephen King wrote that exact book?
I don't know. Which Stephen King book would this be?
Something 1963. Hold on, I'll look it up.
11/22/63.
I actually own this book. My mom got it for me for my birthday, and I still have never read it. Published in 2011.
Okay. So yeah, I wonder if that's
just pre Gone Home.
Here's the thing, though. This is such a popular. Going back to stop the JFK assassination is like, would you travel back in time to kill Hitler? It's one of those things that everybody's come up with.
I agree.
So that's one thing that I like about Terry is that he's written the most obvious book possible. He's written like, what if we could save JFK? And he's obviously, I've seen some people speculate that he's obviously obsessed with 1963 as a year, that is when whatever shocking event
that's interesting.
between him and Oscar happened, and that's when Oscar decided to give up the pharmacy because of his temptations. So I don't know if there's more to find out there. I don't think I got every log. I mean, I was quite thorough. At some point, I'm going to have to go through with a guide or something because I do feel like I've searched the house pretty darn thoroughly. I spent a lot more time than I guess How Long to Beat gives us like 2 or 3 hours. Like I must have spent 5-6 hours with this game. Just reading everything and looking around and stuff. I don't know. Maybe that's too much. But
yeah, I this time I kind of sped through it a bit more. I was more spending my time trying to just remind myself of things that happened because I'm sure if I look at my Steam account for how many hours I put into this game, it's probably around that same. As you were saying, because again,
well, a chunk of that was trying to make that 1 minute run, that impossible 1 minute run.
That's also true.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I took my time with it. I really wanted to savor it. It's a weird blind spot in my kind of walking simulator.
Good. I'm glad
resume.
I picked something that fit for you.
It's especially weird because like I remember. I'm a big fan of Idle Thumbs. I don't know if you remember Idle Thumbs.
I've never heard of Idle Thumbs.
Idle Thumbs is, in my opinion, the greatest video game podcast ever recorded. We had it for just a few blessed years, but it is still worth going back to and listen to the old archive. It's amazing. And that podcast, it was Chris Remo, it was Jake Rodkin, it was Nick Bracken, Sean Veneman. It was basically the folks from 2K Marin. They'd made BioShock Minerva's Den together. They were incredibly thoughtful, and some of them came from, I think Sean came from Telltale. So you had some Telltale folks, and you had a bunch of 2K Marin folks doing a video game podcast. One of the most articulate and thoughtful and brilliant video game podcasts I've ever heard.
Besides us, of course.
If only, God, if only we're a fraction as good. But the point is that I remember when they would occasionally kind of drop hints about Gone Home as they were making it, and you would kind of learn more and more about it. And it was a big deal for them when that launched, and the cast kind of broke up into, Chris and Jake went to do Fulbright, and, Sean, went on, they split into Fulbright and Campo Santo. So, they did, on the Fulbright site, you've got Gone Home and Tacoma.
Mm-hmm.
On the Campo Santo site, you've got Firewatch, and what were they making? They were making In the Valley of Gods before Valve picked them up, and they made Half-Life Alyx. So they're kind of, amazing video game developers. And I absorbed so much about Gone Home, and, they talked about it a lot, and I read a lot of the discourse, and I read the forums, and a lot of it got spoiled for me, I think, years ago, and I just never got around to playing it. So, playing it finally, it is exactly what I expected it to be, but it is of an incredibly high quality of writing.
Yeah, and I'm very curious what they do. Obviously, like you said, they split up, but what is it, Sean and his group, they're making Open Roads now. That got revealed at the Game Awards last year. I remember seeing that trailer, so I'm very interested in seeing that. I still haven't played Tacoma yet.
Tacoma is really great. Tacoma does a little bit of the, almost like what Remember Me or what Cyberpunk does badly, where it lets you skim through kind of 3D recordings of stuff and search those 3D recordings for evidence. So we did a lot of that in Cyberpunk, and it sucked. But Tacoma did it actually really well.
Yeah, but I mean, back at Gone Home, just what did you think of the music choices?
Well, I mean, the whole thing is, it's bleeding 90s.
Yeah, 100%.
And I love
another
just
reason
like
why I love the game.
Oh, like you'll find an old TV guide, and that those guys went and made sure that TV guide was 100% accurate as far as like the shows that were, being broadcast on that particular day.
And I love the fact I love the fact that there are Super Nintendo games, and one of them, I believe, references Bubsy.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the game it reminded me of, and I just went, this is a 10 out of 10 game.
Yeah, well, they've talked about, you should listen to the old cast. They've talked about Bubsy.
I definitely need to.
They will talk about Far Cry 2 endlessly. That is, for some reason, like the game that they became most obsessed with over several years. So everything gets compared to Far Cry 2 all the time, which is hilarious. But you can totally tell the influence of that. Like, that's the thing. These games of theirs feel very personal to me, where I kind of, even though I don't know them personally, I just know them through a podcast, like our listeners know us. You can see like, oh yeah, these creative choices make perfect sense. This is, it's a Chris Remo game, So, so I don't think it's as, my one strike against it is I don't think it's as pretty as Dear Esther was a year before. I think as far as like the texture work and the fidelity of the modeled objects and stuff, it looks kind of old. But you could even say that that's a style in a way.
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely not going for top of the line graphics even for back then. It was just them telling a story in a unique way, and I think they succeeded.
Yes. I would probably, I think a 9 is right on.
Is that where you're going, as a 9?
Yeah.
Okay.
We've been scoring games pretty high lately.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess at least I have.
Yeah, I mean, I was down on Loom, but that's just not my style of game. But for me, I put down 8.5 for Gone Home. So I am right there with you. I kind of had looked at some of my other scores, and I definitely like this more than Maquette, which I had scored an 8. So I made sure I went up just a little bit on there.
I will say, though, for as much as we complained about, Maquette has... You could argue that Maquette has more gameplay substance than Gone Home has, but then I feel like Maquette promised us more gameplay substance than it gave us, whereas Gone Home did not. Yeah,
I still wish that the ending of Maquette didn't feel as rushed as it did.
It does feel very rushed.
Those first 2 levels of Maquette were just amazing, and I absolutely loved it. And then it kind of
that game is super front-loaded.
Yep. But Gone Home, as we finish, another very, very fun game. It does not take very long. I mean, if you want to go, if that's your kind of game and you want to give it a shot, obviously, hopefully you have played it before you listen to us talk about everything. But
don't you want to look in every corner and find out whether, Uncle Oscar molested Terry, or was doing drugs from his pharmacy, or was beating him, or was a closet homosexual? Like, there's so many theories out there.
Mm-hmm. That was the other thing that you just reminded me of. early on in the game, again, they give that tension of, oh God, what happened here is your sister makes a tape about how she goes to school and everything's going great till somebody asked where she moved into, and she said this address, and they like, oh, now I'm the girl that lives in the crazy person home. So I'm like, God, now no one's home, and now the crazy person's back. What is happening?
Sure. It is one of those wacky old, legacy family homes, but man, you wouldn't complain about living there. You wouldn't complain about living in a giant sprawling home in Portland somewhere with 30 rooms.
Well, I mean, if you've seen what Portland looks like now, then maybe. But that's a different story. But yeah, so either way, another very good game, and I'm happy that I have now picked 2 in a row that Jens absolutely loved, and he hasn't hated one in the last 3 that I picked, so I'm happy with that. Jens, sir, you were going to pick Dark Alliance. You were not picking Dark Alliance. So let us know what game we're playing and how long we're going in part 1.
I'm still probably going to suffer through Dark Alliance on my own, but I can't do that to you, Randy. And it wouldn't be good for the show.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, but I'm going to take another risk with something that I really don't know if you're going to come away from it saying, okay, Jens, I was pleasantly surprised by how fantastic this was, or whether it's going to be another one of those, well, we just have different taste and it wasn't for me.
That's what I love about this show is you pick a game, even though we are now going to the point where we give out 5 nominees and the other person picks it. We're still coming from our taste for the most part. And so you pick a game and you're like, this could go one of 2 ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Though I think with Gone Home, you had a pretty sure bet, though.
Yeah. I went safe on that one for sure.
Yeah. I really do think that that game, it may be a little bit overhyped at this point, but I can see where the acclaim comes from in a big way. But no, this is a game that I feel was unfairly maligned and overlooked. When it first came out, it became kind of a cult classic. When it came out, there was some controversy about the fact that they sold the ending of the game as separate DLC, which is not something that I think they're ever going to live down. I mean, we're still talking about it now since we're playing this game. And but I absolutely love it for the story that it tells and the production value and the melodrama of it, and just being an anime in video game form like I've never seen. Like, this is the closest that they've ever come to just making an anime, like a perfect serialized anime in structure, but as a video game. And that game is Asura's Wrath. Now, Asura's Wrath, it's a 3D action game that is about 40% 3D action and 60% QuickTime events.
Oh, God.
So just be aware of that going in. However, the QuickTime events are amazing.
We will be giving that a try. So if you want to join us, how far are we going in part 1?
So the game has 18 chapters if you count the true ending, which I think we should. And Randy, we'll make sure that you play it somehow.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
Because you can't be skipping. Nobody should skip the true ending of this game. It's a really great final boss. So with that included, we've got 18 chapters. Okay. So we would be going to chapter 9. That would take us halfway through the game. All right. Or episode 9, as they call it, because each chapter is a 23-minute, perfect little bit of anime.
Right, we're watching an anime in between every chapter?
No. Basically, each chapter is structured like an episode of, but yes, every now and then you'll get to control, every now and then you'll get to do some third-person punching things.
Gotcha. Okay,
but
that makes sense.
Mostly you'll be doing crazy QuickTime events.
All right, so there you go. We will do episodes 1 through 9 in 2 weeks for Asura's Wrath, and you'll see if Jens picked correctly or incorrectly with me. That's the fun part. Next week, we are back here with Chapter Select at the movies with Final Fantasy Spirits Within. So that'll be an interesting one. It's been a few years since I have watched that movie, so
same.
Has it held up? We will find out next week. But for that, if you want to get a hold of Jens, his Twitter is @ApertureSilence. My Twitter is @RandyIsbell. Our Twitter is @chapter_select. So get a hold of us on those. Go play Asura's Wrath. Go watch Final Fantasy Spirits Within. But until then, that's Jens, I'm Randy, and we will see you in the next chapter.